You're live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Hundreds feared dead on France's Mayotte as Cyclone Chido leaves a trail of death and destruction, damage to airports and electricity distribution in the French Indian Ocean territory hinder relief ops. South Korea court begins review of Yoon impeachment over his December 3rd martial law attempt. Investigators plan to question him this week. Israel plans to expand settlements in occupied Golan Heights after the fall of Assad. Netanyahu says has no interest in a conflict with Syria. Badly damaged two Russian oil tankers cause oil spill in the Black Sea. Rescue operation expected to resume today after being suspended due to bad weather. Sri Lanka's President Anurakumara Dissanayake to meet his Indian counterpart Draupadi Murmu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi visit to further strengthen multifaceted and mutually beneficial cooperation between the two nations. And in sports, Australian drivers seat as day 3 of Gabba test underway in Brisbane. Well, on to the top story. Several homes and trees were destroyed on the French archipelago of Mayotte in the Indian Ocean after Cyclone Chido swept through the region. Aerials filmed by the French overseas gendarmerie showed a devastated island after Cyclone Chido swept through overnight, bringing winds of more than 200 kilometers per hour. The French Interior Ministry said that several hundred people may have been killed and damaged to makeshift housing, government buildings and a hospital. Rescue personnel were dispatched to help pick up debris. The authorities added concerns about access to food, water and sanitation have also been raised after the storm. Cyclone Chido was the strongest storm in more than 90 years to hit the islands.
C'est extrêmement difficile à dire.
It's extremely difficult to say. I think there will certainly be several hundreds, perhaps approaching 1,000 or even a few thousands. I was myself at the command center with all my colleagues. Like each of us, we experienced this event. Inevitably, there is a much higher count. We will try to do the count because it is obviously up to us to draw up this toll.
Le centre opérationnel s'est envolé.
Well, after devastating Mayotte, Cyclone Chido entered Mozambique on Sunday, toppling utility poles, shelters and flooding roads. A video published by the United Nations Children Fund showed wind blowing through palm trees and flooded roads in Pemba. It said that they were responding to the needs of those affected by the storm. Malawi and Zimbabwe are also prepared for the flooding by cyclone as they warned their population for evacuation. Cyclones sweep through southeastern Indian Ocean and southern Africa from December to March. And moving on, South Korea's Constitutional Court will begin reviewing the impeachment of President Yoon over his December 3rd martial law attempt, while investigators plan to question him this week. All 6 current justices of the court will attend the first meeting over the impeachment, which the opposition-led parliament passed on Saturday. The court has up to 6 months to decide whether to remove Yoon from office or to reinstate him. Yoon and a number of senior officials face potential charges of insurrection for the short-lived martial law. A joint team of investigators from the police, the defense ministry and an anti-corruption agency are planning to call Yoon in for questioning on Wednesday. On Sunday, Yoon did not appear in response to a summons for questioning by a separate investigation by the prosecutor's office. His presidential powers will be suspended until the Constitutional Court decides whether to formally remove him from office or reinstate him. Well, the Israeli government on Sunday unanimously approved a plan to enhance Israeli settlement building in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights following the toppling of Syria's longtime leader, Bashar al-Assad. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said the government had unanimously approved the demographic development of the occupied territory, which would seek to double the Israeli population there. The new plan is only for the portion of the Golan Heights that Israel has occupied since 1967. In 1981, Israel's Knesset moved to impose Israeli law over the territory in an effective annexation. The seized area, which had been demilitarized as part of an agreement reached after the 1973 war, also includes Mount Hermon overlooking the Syrian capital Damascus. In a statement, Netanyahu praised the plan, which provides more than $11 million to increase the settler population. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump about a recent push to secure the release of Israeli and foreign hostages held by Hamas in Gaza.
I discussed all of this again last night with my friend U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. It was a very friendly, very warm and very important conversation. We talked about the need to complete Israel's victory, and we also talked at length about the efforts we are making to free our hostages. We constantly continue to work tirelessly to return our hostages home, living and dead alike.
Well, foreign countries stepped up efforts on Sunday to establish contacts with Syria's interim rulers, a week after Islamist-led rebels sent President Bashar al-Assad fleeing to Moscow, ending decades of brutal rule. UN Syria envoy Geir Pedersen was among those arriving in Damascus and met country's de facto leader Ahmed al-Sahara, where he pressed for justice and accountability for crimes. Pedersen hoped for a swift end to the sanctions to help facilitate economic recovery, and necessity of offering support for safe return of refugees was also discussed. Both discussed the need to reconsider a roadmap outlined by the Security Council for the country in 2015. UN Security Council Resolution 2254 of 2015 calls for a Syrian-led process facilitated by the United Nations, establishing within 6 months non-sectarian governance and settling a schedule for a process of drafting a new constitution. It also calls for free and fair elections and also mentioned Nusra's terrorist designation. Well, a special Russian Air Force flight from the Khmeimim Air Base in Syria evacuated some of the Russian diplomatic personnel in Damascus as well as Belarus and North Korean diplomats. Russia is also pulling back its military from the front lines in northern Syria and from posts in the Alawite Mountains, but is not leaving its two main bases in the country. The bases in Syria are an integral part of Russia's global military presence, as the Tartus naval base is Russia's only Mediterranean repair and resupply hub, with Khmeimim a major staging post for military and mercenary activity in Africa. Well, Britain on Sunday announced a $63 million aid package to help vulnerable Syrians, as millions of Syrians need humanitarian assistance after more than a decade of civil war that shattered much of the country's infrastructure and displaced large numbers of people. Some of the many who fled the country are returning from neighboring states. That money, mostly distributed through UN channels, will support emerging needs, including the rehabilitation of essential services such as water, hospitals and schools. Well, to help Syrians in neighboring countries, £10 million will go to the World Food Programme in Lebanon, and £10 million will be going to Jordan via the WFP and the UN's Refugee Agency. Meanwhile, British Foreign Minister David Lammy also said that it had diplomatic contact with the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS group.
HTS remains a proscribed organisation, but we can have diplomatic contact, and so we do have diplomatic contact, as you would expect. We want to see a representative government, an inclusive government. We want to see chemical weapons stockpiles secured and not used. and we want to ensure that there is not continuing violence. And so for all of those reasons, using all the channels that we have available, and those are diplomatic and of course intelligence-led channels, we seek to deal with HTS where we have to.
Well, a violent storm in the Kerch Strait triggered a catastrophic oil spill after a Russian tanker, Volgo-Neft 212, split apart, spilling thousands of tons of oil into the critical waterway. The tanker, carrying 15 crew members, broke in half with its bow sinking. One person died while 12 were rescued, including 2 in critical condition. Amid the turmoil, a second tanker, Volgo-Neft 239, sustained heavy damage and drifted dangerously close to shore. Rescue operations were suspended due to harsh weather but are expected to resume today. President Vladimir Putin ordered an emergency response, deploying helicopters and vessels to manage the crisis. The Kerch Strait, vital for Russian grain and oil exports, now faces an escalating ecological and logistical disaster. Well, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger will have a 6-month grace period following their exit from the Economic Community of West African States, scheduled for January 29th, a year after the countries announced their intentions to leave. The decision, reached at a summit of West Africa's main political and economic group this weekend in the Nigerian capital, Abuja, was seen as a last-ditch effort to dissuade the 3 countries from leaving. The summit of the Economic Community of West African States was seen as a chance to address the impending withdrawal of the 3 countries on January 29th. While January 29th remains the official withdrawal date, the effective date for their departure has been extended to July 29th, a transition period during which mediators from the bloc will seek to bring the 3 member countries back to ECOWAS without prejudice. On Saturday, Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso reaffirmed their decision to leave as irreversible and jointly declared that their territories would remain visa-free for all ECOWAS citizens post-exit. And the remaining 5 Australians from the infamous drug trafficking Bali Nine gang have returned home after serving nearly 20 years in Indonesian prisons. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese confirmed that 5 members of the Bali Nine drug ring have returned from Indonesia after diplomatic efforts between the countries this month to strike a repatriation deal. The men were among 9 people arrested in 2005 trying to smuggle more than 8 kgs of heroin out of the Indonesian resort island of Bali. 2 of the ringleaders of the Bali Nine group were executed in 2015, prompting Australia to recall its ambassador in protest. The only woman in the group was released from prison in 2018 and a male member died of cancer the same year.
I'm pleased to confirm that Australian citizens Matthew Norman, Scott Rush, Martin Stevens, C.E. Chen and Michael Shugai have returned to Australia this afternoon. I want to express my gratitude to President Prabowo for Indonesia's cooperation and commitment to working with Australia on this matter. I have conveyed my personal appreciation to President Prabowo for his act of compassion. These Australians served more than 19 years in prison in Indonesia. It was time for them to come home.
And some more news from around the world. Bolivia held the country's top judges election on Sunday. The elections have sparked debates as the candidates have been strictly prohibited from campaigning. Bolivia is the only country in the world to elect its top magistrates by popular vote. Pope Francis celebrated Mass before a crowd of over 9,000 people in Corsica's capital, Ajaccio, on Sunday. This was the first ever trip by a pontiff to the French Mediterranean island till now. Before wrapping up his visit, Pope also held talks with French President Emmanuel Macron. Bakers and designers showcased intricate gingerbread creations at Stockholm's museum on Sunday during an annual competition. This year's theme, Comeback, inspired designs like Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory and an Oasis reunion concert. Visitors voted a miniature Wonka factory as the winner, applauding its colorful icing and candy details. Thousands of motorbike enthusiasts rode through the Catalan streets on Sunday as an annual Christmas tradition in the city. The event has sparked controversy among few local residents as the parade was not authorized by the city council. Residents argue that these kind of activities contribute to air and noise pollution and traffic congestion in the city. And still to come in this edition of DD India Live. India celebrates fearless women vigor of armed forces on 53rd Vijay Diwas. Queen's Run organised in Gujarat's Vadodara sends strong message that women are safe in the city. And we'll show you Santa Run as thousands participate in Mexico.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the economic brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, and moving on, neighbours India and Sri Lanka are looking forward to advancing their ties further with the first overseas visit of the island nation's recently elected President Anunakumara Dissanayake to New Delhi for 3 days. The Lankan is set to meet his Indian counterpart and Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday. Here's more.
A warm welcome to the recently elected Anunakumara Dissanayake in New Delhi by India's Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting, L. Murugan. The Sri Lankan president on Sunday began his maiden 3-day state visit to India after assuming office. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, called on the Lankan leader within hours of his landing in New Delhi. Prior to his arrival, while announcing Disanayake's visit, India's Ministry of External Affairs had said, President Dissanayake is set to meet his Indian counterpart. He'll hold discussions with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The two leaders will take up bilateral issues of mutual interest. He will also participate in a business event in Delhi. The event is to promote investment and commercial linkages between India and Sri Lanka. The Lankan president will also visit Bodh Gaya during his India visit. The Foreign Ministry further said that Sri Lanka is India's closest maritime neighbor. Sri Lanka also holds a central place in PM's vision of Sagar and India's neighborhood first policy. Sagar stands for security and growth for all in the region. Sri Lankan leader's visit to India assumed significance after his party's victory with a 2/3 majority in the recent parliamentary election and amid his government's efforts to rebuild the country's crisis-hit economy. The invitation for the visit was extended by India's External Affairs Minister, who travelled to Colombo shortly after Disanayake's electoral victory. Dr. Jaishankar was the first foreign dignitary to visit Sri Lanka following the National People's Power or the NPP alliance's government's rise to power. India remains among Sri Lanka's largest trading and investment partners. It provided a multifaceted assistance to the island nation of over $4 billion during its 2022 economic crisis. Bureau Report, DD India.
And moving on, Moldova's embassy was inaugurated in New Delhi, marking a significant step in enhancing the partnership between the two countries. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, and Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Moldova, Mihail Popsoy, jointly inaugurated the embassy. On the occasion, Jaishankar highlighted the importance of this event as a milestone in India-Moldova relations, especially since establishing diplomatic ties in 1992. He said both the countries have witnessed growing engagement in areas such as trade, education, technology and cultural exchanges.
As we contemplate a deeper engagement with Europe, it is natural that we will focus on various bilateral relationships, including obviously that with Moldova. We have witnessed, as you have heard, a growing engagement between our two countries, spanning trade, education, technology, and cultural exchanges. Moldova's warm embrace of India yoga traditions and practices, of Hindi language and Indian culture, I think these are reflections of our close people-to-people ties.
Well, Jaishankar also held discussion with Moldovan Deputy Prime Minister Mihail Popsoy. Popsoy is on an official visit to India from December 15th to the 17th. And India celebrates Vijay Diwas today to commemorate the anniversary of victory of Indian Armed Forces in the 1971 Indo-Pakistan War. The war, which was short and intense, was fought in both Eastern and Western fronts. The 13-day war resulted in the complete surrender of Pakistani forces and the creation of Bangladesh. The greatest victory ever saw the emergence of Bangladesh as an independent nation, and India rose as a regional power to reckon with. With this decisive victory over a formidable opponent, the armed forces of India once again affirmed themselves as a strong component of national power. The day celebrates the fearless vim and vigor of armed forces. The significance of this day is existent in the hearts of the common folk to this day. And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. Tamil Nadu is bracing for another spell of rainfall starting Monday after recording surplus rainfall for the season since October 1st. Indian Met Department has issued an orange alert for heavy to very heavy rainfall in the certain parts of southern state from 17 December till 19th, with December marking the last phase of the northeast monsoon season. This renewed spell is expected to further pose challenges to residents and infrastructure. J&K Women's Development Corporation organized a mega awareness camp cum Loan Mela in the Bani Hill town of Ramban district in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. The aim was to provide a platform to people, especially youth, aspiring to take self-employment ventures for their economic upliftment. The awareness of different government schemes for livelihood and employment was targeted especially with on-spot registration of beneficiaries and potential entrepreneurs. Vadodara International Marathon organized a Queen's Run on Sunday with women from all walks of life participating to send out a message that women are safe in the city and the police are committed to the safety of all the citizens. Hamari Dord, Hamari Suraksha was the theme, or Run, Our Safety. Apart from the citizens, women corps of She Team also participated in the marathon. And on to some sports news now. In cricket, Mitchell Starc strikes early once again, removing Yashasvi Jaiswal and Shubman Gill as India have started the proceedings after bowling out Australia for a mammoth 445 runs on day 3 of Gabba Test. Alex Carey and Mitchell Starc resumed the Australian innings at 405 for 7 on day 3, with the wicket-keeper batter quickly completing his half-century. The Australian bowlers are now eyeing some quick wickets in order to dominate the game. On day 2, Travis Head scored a sensational 152 to put Australia in a commanding position. Steve Smith also gave him superb support, notching up a resilient century himself. Meanwhile, for India, Jasprit Bumrah was the star as he scalped 6 wickets while Mohammad Siraj took 2 wickets. And here we come to the end of the bulletin. Take a look at Santa Claus race now in Mexico City, where around 3,000 participants, including adults, children and dogs, took part in the festive race. Since 2018, a Santa Run has become a Christmas tradition for the residents of Mexico City. Well, India's public broadcaster Prasar Bharati has recently launched Waves, entering the field of OTT platform. Waves provide a complete infotainment ecosystem to digital media and OTT audiences. If you also want great content for free, then download Waves today. Well, we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.